Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Good evening to our January 27th, 2020 Board of Estimate Taxation. I'd like to call the meeting in order and start with a salute to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I believe these are the new speakers. Seems very sensitive. It seems to work from quite a distance. I'd like to welcome everyone. I just would like you to know I only have 7 hours, 20 minutes, and 15 seconds invested in the seating arrangements. I will say that a very prominent leader in the town said try Post-its. That didn't work for me either. But I hope it works, and I'm trying to think about my neck, and I'm looking at Mr. Raymer over there, and I'm used to yelling in that direction. Now I have to, but again, we'll get comfortable, and again, welcome. I'd like to start with item number 2 and call on the clerk of our board for our routine applications.
Mic is working. The microphone is working. We have 5 routine applications, and I'll read them. The first is PR1 from the Parks and Recreation Department for $14,550, which is an additional appropriation for the master plan. The second one is PR2 from the Parks and Recreation Department for $52,000, which is an additional appropriation for the water treatment system at the Griff. The third one is SE4 from the First Selectman's Office for $2,000, which is an approval to use a contribution to Channel 79. The fourth one is FI3 from the Finance Department, $40,000, which is a release of conditions for the project to automate purchasing and invoicing. And the fifth one is NW2 from the Nathaniel Witherell, which is a $230,000 additional appropriation for professional fees.
Do I have a second on that? Second by Ms. Harkington. As you know, with our routine applications, those are similar to our consent item that the RTM adopts. We do not have committee reports on these. These have all been through committee and passed.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Moriarty?
I would like to recommend or request that NW2, Nathaniel Witherell's interim appropriation be taken out of the routine applications, and that we actually delay discussing that till the chair of the Nathaniel Witherell board is able to attend later in the meeting.
I will entertain those 2 separate motions together. The first motion is to separate from routine to make a non-routine item Nathaniel Witherell 2 as it appears on our call. Do I have a second on that motion?
You do.
Second, discussion on that item.
Just because I believe that there are 4 elements included that interim appropriation, and I think there's a few outstanding questions.
Okay, motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That item is carried 12-0. I will entertain now a motion to postpone this item until the arrival of the chair of the Nathaniel Witherell board, who I believe is in the Nathaniel Witherell board meeting right now.
Yes.
Okay.
I second that motion as well.
So the idea will be whatever item we are on at that time, we'll complete that item and move to the NW2 immediately following that. So we're understanding what we're doing here.
That's correct.
Okay. That brings us back to the routine applications as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Those items have carried 12-0-0. Brings us to our assessor's report. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. On January 6th, I was up in New Britain with 2 pretrials, and I just want to thank you. I understand that I have been reappointed for another 2 years, and thank you. I appreciate the vote. For tonight's business, 2019 grand list has been signed. I signed that on January 21st. You'll see in my report that you have the totals for the 2019 grand list. Today we sent out increased notices for 3,111 real estate parcels, and we also sent out notices to all the personal property accounts. So everybody in the personal property list, all 4,000, get a notice regardless of what has happened to their assessment. Just something that we've done over the years, and it's good practice, so everybody knows what their assessments is on those. The Board of Assessment Appeals will have a staff person in the town hall from February 1st to February 20th. Their applications are now on their website. We're trying to automate this as much as possible, so all the applications they will be taking, and hopefully will be doing it through a form on their website. Senior tax relief, we've calculated the new senior tax relief for the 2019 grand list for this year. The application periods will be from February 1st to May 15th. We will be sending out the applications this week to all of those seniors that are required to file this year. Okay? Does anybody have any questions for me?
Mr. Raymer.
Sorry.
Sure.
I'm not sure if I know what that last sentence means. You'd be sending them out to all the people who made applications previously.
Right. You have an obligation in the seniors to file every other year.
Right.
So we send them out, we're required to send out applications to those who have filed in the past and this year, that filed in the past 2 years ago, not last year.
And during the same period of time, you'll be accepting applications
Yes.
from new applicants as
We
well.
accept applications from any new seniors, and we also accept applications from any seniors where their income may have changed substantially or significantly from the prior year. So if they want to increase their benefit, we are certainly able to do that for them. Okay?
Ms. Moriarty.
I just wanted to make one comment on the assessor's report. I saw that the October 2019 assessment increased the grand list by 0.8%, an increase of 0.9%, including motor vehicles. So it was 0.8 on real estate, my mistake.
Yep.
And I want to point out to my colleagues that in the budget guidelines, we assumed a grand list increase of 0.5%. Now, I recognize that the actions of the BAA have not yet been taken, but as we do our budget deliberations, it looks like the grand list increase might be higher than we estimated. Thank you.
That's good. Mr. Deuce.
Lauren, hi. A question on your first paragraph under real estate on the first page, third line.
Yep.
You reference income and expense penalties
Yes.
applying to certain properties, and that had the effect of increasing the grand list. I don't see how that follows.
Okay. Every year, my office is required, we send them out in April, they are due by June 1st, an income and expense form to all businesses who actually have rental income from their properties. But it's not just two families, it's basically commercial properties, so it's above 8 units. Any landlord is required to fulfill that obligation to us. If they don't file, we have an obligation to penalize them. And unfortunately, we had less people file this year than have in the past. There's a couple accounts that failed to file on a timely basis.
You need to explain what happens when you penalize.
Oh,
That
so-
completes the question.
Right, I'm sorry. So the penalty is based upon the assessment. It's an increase of 10% on their assessed value. So that's why it increases. So we had 79 accounts last year. We had 82, or excuse me, yeah, we had 82 this year.
But that's kind of backwards. Aren't the assessments driven by state law? It has to be 70% of the estimated fair market value, and we just can't arbitrarily adjust the assessment based on penalties.
I am not adjusting the assessment at all. What I am doing is I'm adding, it's part of the state statutes, I am adding a 10% penalty to all those real estate properties that had a requirement to file an income and expense report to our office. Okay, sorry.
It's intermission. The movie's got to change the reel.
So the difference is that we had a couple of rather larger office buildings and one retail building that is leased out that failed to file their income and expense information this year.
Okay, I don't want to belabor this point, but if they have a penalty, you still can't change the assessment.
I'm not changing the assessment. There are
Okay.
assessments that change. This is a separate
But it
add-on.
increased the grand list as a result.
Right, I increase the grand list. I don't change their assessment. There's a difference there.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Ms. Cruiser?
Quick question on the assessor's table evaluation as of October 1st. There are a number of exemptions, real estate, motor vehicle exemptions, et cetera. Could you just explain what those are?
So the
High level.
exemptions that you see on this first page are basically our veterans exemptions, our senior exemptions, and disabled exemptions. The exempt properties are not reflected on this page. We have 957 exempt properties that equal roughly $3.6 billion. Those are not part of our taxable grand list. The list I give you here is just what basically you are going to assess and use for your mill rate calculation. Okay?
Ms. Tarkington?
I move that,
Oh.
I move, oh, not yet?
I'll accept your motion to move that if I can get one question in first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I thought you were looking.
So the senior tax relief program, how do you explain the property owners that are involved in it, the ones that are not involved in it, that might be eligible, how do we advertise that is available for them?
So what I've done is I send this page to Lori Contadino, and we also are required to advertise it as legal notice as well. But Lori Contadino, who's in charge of our seniors, basically, Council on Aging, basically helps us recruit and get this information out to the seniors.
Thank you. Ms. Tarkington?
In addition, Lauren, wasn't there a notice in our tax bills that arrived with our tax bills, a little line that said you could?
Yeah, I also believe it's on the back of everybody's tax bills as well, on the real estate tax bills. I didn't
Thank
see
you.
January's, but I'm assuming it was on there I know it was on there in July.
Yeah, I think, it was maybe in the middle of the tear-off piece, and I think they,
With the car key warning.
anyway.
Ms. Tarkington? Do
I move that we accept the assessor's report.
we have a second? Seconded by Mr. Raymer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. And thank you very much for accepting us for another term. Moves us to the controllers report.
Good evening, BET members. A couple of quick comments, then I'll open it up to questions. Good news, we maintained our AAA with Moody's and S&P. Better news is we got very low rates with the 5-year general obligation bonds and the 1-year bands. A second item is the good news is the Greenwich Fire Department fire study. We will start the project with a kickoff meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30, which is one of the reasons why we delayed the Budget Committee meeting till 10 o'clock. And then finally, one more comment before the questions. Didn't have time to put in the Hamilton Avenue. I didn't have any information, I'm sorry, on the Greenwich High School Performing Arts flood. This is the 5th flood at 3 different schools in the last year and a half. And we just got damage totals. This, as of today, for the Greenwich High School flood, it's $340,000 and change. What's different about this one this year is the deductible is $100,000. The previous 4, the deductible was lower at $50,000. So that's the update on Hamilton Avenue. That's ongoing. We have the same adjuster for all 5 floods, so he's very familiar with the players, and this should go smoothly. And I'll open it up to any questions on the controls report.
Ms. Tarkington?
May I ask the deductible, is that just on every project, or is it because it's happened multiple times? Or is that our new insurance for every physical property?
For this year's insurance, it's deductible per incident. So if you had another flood tomorrow at a different school, it would be start all over with a $100,000 deductible.
Thank you.
Ms. Moriarty?
I just wanted to confirm on the bonds effective interest rate. Is that structured such that we're paying a higher interest rate and then there's a premium that we take over 5 years? Or was there no premium in this particular
On the
issuance?
5-year bonds?
Yeah.
The coupon was 5%, the premium was $4,922,000. It was, well, five coupons, 5%.
I was going to add a few things about the auditorium project, but it actually leads into another comment. We're about 3 weeks into this term, and I think I can speak for Ms. Moriarty and myself and the committee chairs that your help getting us going between you and Roland and our boss Elaine, we really appreciate it. There's been a lot of changeover. We've been meeting schedules. We're going to talk a little bit about the calendar going forward, and everybody in your office and you have been just really helpful, and thank you. Really appreciate it. Can I get a motion?
I move that we accept the controller's report.
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Deuce. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That item is carried. The treasurer's report now comes before us. I'd like to make a comment if I can. In the past, the BET has accepted receipt, and I think we're responsible for this report, and I think we're eligible for any conversations. And I will be going back to, and if a member wanted to postpone it for any questions, I will be entertaining a motion to accept this treasurer's report, which will need a second and discussion and a vote. So with that, I have nothing on the treasurer's report. Can I get a motion to accept?
I so move that we accept the treasurer's report.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Deuce. Discussion? I think this is it's interesting. The returns are still not what they were in '05. Let's say that.
Oh, those are monthly returns on the first page.
I know. But I remember '05, what the numbers look like. So with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That has carried. If I can flip the page. Before I get into items 6, 7, and 8, I would like to say during the month, if you have something, if you're one of the liaisons or on one of the working teams or on one of the committees and we have something, obviously we would always rather have it ahead of time in writing. There's been some phenomenal dialogue that I've seen so far over the weekend about starting the budget process and meeting with some of the different departments, and tomorrow that really kicks off. So I appreciate that. So if I go by something and there is something that's not checked off, please just raise your hand and we'll take care of it. I know under 6, we have budget committee check. Ms. Tarkington?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We start our term by welcoming Deborah Hess as a new member of the Budget Committee, joining Leslie Moriarty and Jeff Raymer and me, Leslie Tarkington, as returning members. We begin the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget cycle of meetings tomorrow at 10 a.m. and work until 4 p.m. in the Town Hall meeting room. Our first selectman, Fred Camillo, will present his departments and his new initiatives, followed by Police, Parking Services, DPW Engineering, and DPW Waste Management departments. We have another full day Thursday beginning at 9 until 4 p.m., again in this room with the Board of Education. We are operating on an unusually tight schedule this year. We, like the public, received the budgets last Thursday evening. An additional 6 full days with departments, all beginning at 9 a.m., and 3 days of consolidation and decision-making will follow. Our Budget Committee Department Review Calendar is published online at greenwichct.org. We hope that you will attend in person or follow the budget meetings by watching Channel 79 or by live streaming on YouTube. While we welcome the public's interest and involvement, these meetings are working sessions and are not public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as point of clarification, it's greenwichct.gov.org.
That's right. Our emails are still .org, and it is .gov. Thank you.
Thank you. If I'd like to add to that, there is a calendar, if anybody would like it, and I'd like it to be as public as we can. I would ask Ken, do you have a copy of this? Okay. We do get, we're at a shorter schedule. We're beginning sort of the budget process earlier this year, and I think this is important. There's an enormous amount of departments and meetings, and we do get requests for this. So we'll keep this as a sort of a working document. There might be some changes, but I think it's important. And to the Budget Committee members who are beginning tomorrow at 10 o'clock, you're getting docked your pay for missing that couple hours in the morning, but we're going to excuse you. But again, you have a lot of meetings. Good luck and go to it.
Thank you.
Investment law, HR, liaison reports, public safety. Mr. Weisbrod, Mr. Raymer, Ms. Vassilotis, you've heard Peter give the notice about tomorrow. Anything you want to add on that? Because I know we're about to kick that process off.
No, only to say that we're meeting with the chief of police and also Greg Hannigan. I'm not quite sure what his official title is, tomorrow morning, mid-morning. And I think maybe better than to try and anticipate that, let's ask people to participate or listen in on the budget hearings and follow along there.
Okay, thank you. We are, as you heard in the controller's report, we are kicking off the first meet and greet with the consultants for the fire study. We'll try to keep that, the information of how that's going on. I think that whole study will be in the hands of the town administrator and the controller. They'll be actually doing all that. We'll be, until we get some information back. I don't think we're going to be too involved in that at the start. Information technology, special project teams, old business. Old business. Let me just get my paper. So as you know, under old business, which is on our agenda, I'll ask for the item to be moved and seconded. We'll get into discussion and a report. Can I get a motion to take on the item of the discussion and vote on the acceptance of the final report for the Nathaniel Withall Strategic Planning Committee?
Mr. Mason?
I wonder if the chair would accept a request for a point of order?
Certainly.
To clarify.
State your point of order.
To my understanding, and I was a member of the committee voted a report which appears before us as the report dated December 6, 2019. It has traveled to us together with, under a cover letter from the committee chair, Art Norton. I'm very grateful to Art Norton. As usual, he did terrific work acting as chair and was tremendously useful to us in bringing the committee to a safe conclusion. But it is important to me that we be careful to be sure exactly what we're adopting. The cover letter from Mr. Norton was not something that the committee had previously seen or voted on. So the report that we should be voting on this evening is the report dated December 6, 2019, not the cover letter. The cover letter is useful information from a learned brethren of ours and interesting for us to read, but the minutes should be clear that what we're adopting is the report dated December 6, 2019.
Your point of information is well taken, and I agree. I think the document before us that I'm trying to get before us with a motion and a second is for that document dated December 6th, 2019, that you as chair at that particular time put on for a first read. So that is the exact document that would be before us on a motion. However, I will say if we do approve this motion, I will be asking for the committee chair and any other speaker and a discussion on it. So if that helps.
I'd like to move the report, just consistent exactly with what Mr. Raymer said, the report.
And I would gladly second it.
Okay, all in favor? I'm sorry, Ms. Cormick.
I just wanted to ask if we could postpone this till Mr. Simon, the chairman of the board of the Nathaniel Withrow. I don't think he's arrived yet, and I know he's straddling two meetings, so I think it's important for him to be here, even for our discussion this as well as the earlier non-routine vote.
I might add to that, if I may. An invitation was made to the members of the board, if they were so inclined, to come and attend our meeting after the conclusion of their meeting. And it might be beneficial that should any of the members of the Nathaniel Withrow board, in fact, wish to come, it might be beneficial that they have the opportunity to be present here for this discussion.
So Ms. Crumick's motion to postpone this item until a later time in this meeting is seconded. I'm assuming I have a second for Mr. Raymer. I would also encourage everyone to understand that we do have guests and members of that working committee here that are diligently waiting too, so I would keep that in mind. So, Ms. Crumack, I believe your motion is to postpone item 9 until the conclusion of item 10, or when the chair of the Nathaniel Witherell Board gets here, and I believe you have a second from Mr. Raymer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. So I will now take us to, sorry, Ms. Weissler, sorry, Mr. Norton. I will now move us to item number 10, which is new business. The BET calendar, the big calendar. I was at the RTM meeting last week with several of us, and if I forget who was there, I'm sorry. The RTM has recently moved their district and their committee and district meetings beginning now for the month of April to March 30, which is in that week, according to our schedule, we have decision day, a workshop, and a public hearing.
Public hearing.
So that leads us a new challenge that we haven't had before.
You want this?
Yes, thank you. That's okay. So I put this item on there because it's school holidays that are causing this and some of the religious holidays, and that does take away our ability to meet with the RTM committees and districts 1 month earlier. I believe the Budget Overview Committee of the RTM has also run into a challenge with this move. So what I would say to everyone is I'll accept comments. If we want to try to make any decision changes to adhere to that or not, I don't know, but I really thought this was an important flag for everyone because this is a real change in at least 15 years that I know of how we work with the RTM standing committees and districts. So conversation, or we can move on. Ms. Moriarty?
I just want to point out that it's not ideal to have it be in conflict, but to move our decision up 2 weeks earlier, I think it interferes with commitments members of this committee have made. It's going to be tough to find 3 open days, I think, when people are available. So unfortunately, I don't think we have an option this year. I think we go ahead, my proposal is we go ahead with the meetings as proposed and as scheduled, and we'll have to just work that much harder in May.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay. Item number 10. The first selectman has requested me to have 2 members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation be attached to what he's calling the Greenwich Plaza Working Group. And this is, as you know, we had a deal before us last year and a lot of discussion on it. It's a very complicated deal, and the first selectman is off and running and trying to make progress on, a modification deal or a new deal, and I commend him on that. So I would like to assign 2 liaisons to that. That would be Ms. Tarkington and Mr. Weisbrod. I would love to give you this assignment with a calendar or a schedule, but I don't have that. So again, from our point of view, there was conversations last term about us, being involved. So we're counting on the 2 of you to keep us kind of informed. So going from there.
David's got his-
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Weisbrod. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the working group, do we have any sense as to the scope of the work, the mandate, the deliverables, and so forth, any details? I know you had raised a very good question as to what would the expectation be and how it would function. I assume that will be forthcoming.
Great question. I don't have the answers. What I can tell you is I think First Selectman Camilla was responding to the dialogue from last year where this whole big deal kind of just showed up and people didn't have time. So I think he's now being completely more transparent and inclusive and getting more people involved. I think there'll probably end up being 8 people on this, only 2 from the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I don't know who the others are. I can't give you that, but, I'm a day late in giving them the names, so I'm.
David, my understanding is that he plans to kick it off sometime in February, so, but there's no exact date yet.
Thank you.
Okay. I've just received word that Mr. Simon is 15 minutes away. I would like to get back to our two items that we have passed by, so I think we can start with item number 9, because there's work of other people, and Mr. Simon can join us. The other item under our action items, that's purely Mr. Simon, so I will just begin back with that. So I had a motion to postpone this item, but this item is now before us. This is the December 6th report. What I would like to do is, before we begin, I don't think I could say thank you enough to the members that served on this, Ms. Weisler, Mr. Norton, and if I forget, then I know who's on our board. Is there anybody else? I think this committee did. Mr. Norton, I'm going to give you the microphone and let you tell us about the committee and its work and comments on this report. Yes, certainly. Mr. Norton, Ms. Weisler, former Board of Estimate and Taxation members. The background behind this is when this committee was formed, and then we had an election, we had some changing of positions unanimously. The BET at the time asked to deviate and keep 2 members from the previous term on this working group. And somehow they rooked Mr. Norton even into staying as chair. So good evening. Long time no see.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
And
Thank
we don't
you.
want to hear about the weather in St. Thomas. We don't want to hear
I
it.
haven't been there in a month. Well, since I've been there, though, I've been to the UK a couple of times for a funeral,
Oh, yes.
family funeral, sister-in-law who died on the 2nd of December. So
Wow.
it's been a fairly rough month. First off, let me say it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to have served for almost 4 years as chair of the committee and the 2 BET chairs. And I think that the committee in the past term did accomplish a great deal, and I will admit that I had not seen the final report until about 20 minutes ago.
Oh, the amendment.
And the cover letter, or transmittal letter, that's attached to it, and I apologize for the fact that I'm indicated as managing director, which references Erickland Capital Management, which is an SEC-registered investment advisor, where I am the managing director. It was transmitted from my office in Stamford, and this has been through numerous iterations as I travel back and forth, both from here to St. Thomas and then to London and Eastbourne in the UK on a couple of occasions. The transmittal letter is my report to the committee and to the Board of Estimate Taxation for the work that was accomplished during the 2 years in which we held, in my count, 23 meetings, 23 scheduled meetings. I think a great deal was accomplished, but I think the committee was still in the process of discovery. And I like to make numerous distinctions as to why I think that it's in the best interest of the town of Greenwich and Nathaniel Witherell that the committee be continued. I'll begin with the fact that the town of Greenwich is a municipality which depends upon taxes for its source of revenue. Nathaniel Witherell is a business opportunity that depends upon economic conditions. It depends upon supply and demand, and its revenue is a result of constant prospecting for customers, which a municipality does not have. And because it's a business opportunity, it is very different and should be under accounting rules which are in effect granted or given for all businesses as opposed to accounting regulations and rules that are specifically related to government operations. There are substantial differences between the two, and we're finally getting through to understand what those distinctions are. My report addresses why I think that the committee should be continued, Mr. Chairman. Because shortly after the committee was formed in March 2017, we decided that it was far more suitable that the committee be considered strategic planning a strategic planning committee as opposed to a special committee. And the reason for that is, what is the function of strategic planning? Actually, there are 5 basic purposes for strategic planning. Strategic planning should identify and direct itself to the strengths of the entity that's being reviewed. It also should address and work to the weaknesses that the particular entity also has. But what is far more important is that strategic planning should be concerned with changes that take place within the business environment in which it functions. It should be constantly identifying what the competition is and how changes are taking place in the competition, with competition, and also should be directing to future direction of where the business enterprise is going to go. There's been so many changes in the healthcare industry, especially that which involves skilled nursing, and the current business model for a skilled nursing facility has become obsolete in the last 20 years. And I was directly involved with that in the 10 years I spent on the board of the merry-go-rounds, which were one of the first entities, both in the town of Greenwich and in this area, which began to identify the changes that are taking place for people of a certain age, especially above the age of 60, which is who a vast majority of the residents who attend or participate and live in Nathaniel Witherell. The changes have been taking place to the extent that we are now have reached what is known as the continuum of care model, in which a skilled nursing facility is one component of it. And that became, I think, very obvious to the committee when we were approached by Waveney, who was interested in seeking if they could buy 40 beds from the town of Greenwich and expand their operation into Nathaniel Witherell. I think it's very important and crucial that Nathaniel Witherell, for its survival, has to continue to address changes in the market condition, changes in the environment, and changes that are taking place within the suppliers that it has, whether it be the hospitals, whether it be other facilities which direct patients and recommend patients to Nathaniel Witherell. And I think that Nathaniel Witherell should be paying very close attention to some of the things that the state of Connecticut, especially Connecticut Medicaid, is incorporating, in which they have the potential to be the biggest competitor Nathaniel Witherell has, because there are multiple programs to keep people in their homes as opposed to being institutionalized. It's driven as much by the costs as well as it is by the continuum of life that we have, our lives extending, and the needs of the people who become residents of a facility such as Nathaniel Witherell. I think I'll indicate what the committee's work did in the past year and conclude with why I think that the Strategic Planning Committee should be continued. The committee has identified 5 areas in its work this year that should be addressed and continue to be addressed. The fact that the town of Greenwich tries to operate a facility such as Nathaniel Witherell, in which the revenue from one is very different, revenue sources from one, meaning the town of Greenwich, versus the revenue sources for a facility like Nathaniel Witherell are dependent upon market conditions, supply and demand of people who use the facility under the various conditions for which it is used. I think that what the committee identified were 5 areas that need expertise and concentration, and they are the current governance of Nathaniel Witherell, how it is governed under what business model. Because the business model of a standalone skilled nursing facility is being eliminated because of the changes that are taking place in those particular market. I think that Nathaniel Witherell has to continue to pay attention to market conditions, both locally and within the general area in which it draws its patients. It also has to pay attention and should be paying extreme attention to the operational practices within the facility. And I think that we were advised through Health Dimensions Group, or HDG Group, as I refer to in my committee, as to the need for modifications and changes in the operational facilities and operational methodologies that are currently in effect in Nathaniel Witherell. And I think the biggest problem Nathaniel Witherell also is facing is that as a standalone business, that it dependent upon revenue coming from supply and demand, that the political control that's currently exerted over Nathaniel Witherell is a major impediment. So, Mr. Chairman, I would strongly recommend, even though I've only been advised in the last couple of days, that the operation, there's been some changes in the operation of Nathaniel Witherell. I wasn't aware of that until I think last Thursday that had taken place. I think that's in the best interest of both the BET as well as the town of Greenwich that the committee be continued.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Norton? And I want to deal with, with our external speakers. Thank you. I cannot, I'll try to say it again at the end. I cannot thank you for your commitment. Ms. Weisler.
Good evening, Chairman Mason and members of the BET. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak on behalf of this motion for the BET to accept the report. However, before I do so, I want to wish all of you well in your upcoming term and to thank you for your service. I know a little bit of what's involved in doing that, so thank you for all the hours ahead of you. As you may know, I was privileged to serve on the first Strategic Planning Committee that prepared a report 2 years ago, as well as on the committee that prepared the report before you tonight. I also served on the RTM Special Committee that analyzed Witherell in 2004. So I have a bit of a long history with Witherell. I wanted to address two issues I've heard raised about the report before you. First, some have asked what's the value of the second report, given that the BET had previously spent 2 years studying Witherell. The 2017 report recommended that the committee continue to work, as Art mentioned, and use independent experts to assess Witherell's outlook and make recommendations for the most viable option for its future. During the past 2 years, HGG, a nationally recognized healthcare consulting firm, reviewed the work of the 2017 report. And unfortunately, it confirmed the following key findings of that earlier report. First, Witherell's revenues will be under increasing pressure from competition from independent and assisted living facilities. Changes in Medicare reimbursement and regulations will also pressure Witherell's revenues. Second, Witherell's operating costs are much higher than peer facilities as a result of higher wage and benefit costs. Some argue that that premium is necessary to ensure the quality of services. However, HGG's analysis showed that both 5-star rated Waveney and 5-star rated The Villa, which was previously run by the city of Stamford, have much lower labor costs but enjoy higher ratings than Witherell. Taking both of these factors into account, HGG forecasts that on continued town control, Witherell's cash losses will escalate sharply in the next 5 years. The second issue that I've heard is, why is the town looking at Witherell again? Hasn't the town already made that decision to operate it? There are, however, I believe, several key reasons to revisit that decision. First, unfavorable regulatory changes are proliferating. Since HGG completed the report less than a year ago, the state has announced a major adverse change in Medicaid reimbursement. Second, recent events point to weak financial controls and some accounting irregularities at Witherell. Both of these factors highlight the real challenge of Witherell continuing as a standalone facility. Finally, if we look back at the projections that were made just 7 years ago when the town approved Project Renew, Witherell's losses in fiscal 19 were 6 times greater than originally projected. Having studied Witherell in depth for the past 4 years and going back to 2004, I greatly appreciate the services that it provides to our town, our residents, and other people. However, I think the time has come to develop a governance model that ensures that those services are sustained for future generations. So thank you for your time and your consideration, and best of luck as you consider this difficult issue.
Thank you. Will the members of the special committee raise their hand for just a second? I know it was Mr. Deuce, Mr. Raymer, Mr. Drake, and Ms. Crumick. The four of you, along with our forever BET members, as I always say, it's been a long road. I think back of what I was thinking when I formed this committee. It would be nice if I could say I don't know, but I do know. I think this is before us tonight. I'm going to open it up for discussion. If any of the committee members would like to opine first, I would like them to go first before general. So in any order, if you want, Mr. Deuce.
Thank you, Mike. It's been my privilege to have served on this committee for the past 2 years. During this period, I have learned the following 3 items. Running a skilled nursing facility is very challenging, no news there, and the challenges are increasing due to changing regulations and a changing business model. The model is changing from a standalone facility to a large organization that is better equipped to acquire and deploy resources, from a skilled nursing facility to a continuing care retirement community, and from care provided at a facility to care provided at home. Second, as an owner-operator of a skilled nursing facility, a municipality has greater challenges to do than non-public owner-operators. These challenges include higher labor costs and a more cumbersome governance process. And finally, I've learned how deeply many in the town, and for that matter, all my colleagues on the BET, do care about taking care of the older citizens in our town. But this can no longer allow us to ignore the increasing internal and external challenges that Nathaniel faces. The committee's report that was submitted last month to the BET and is now being considered for acceptance tonight summarizes well the efforts of the committee. Despite its name as a strategic planning committee, the committee also had sought, with the help of consultants at HCG, to identify means for improving the operations of Nathaniel Witherell. And many of its recommendations have been accepted already by Nathaniel Witherell. The committee's work, however, remains incomplete. Primarily, we still do not know how much a third-party operator and owner might value Nathaniel. And we cannot make a strategic decision without knowing what the value of one's options might be. And that is why in the report, we had also asked that among its recommendations that the town engage ultimately a financial advisor, and this is not to be confused with a consultant, to allow it to make a more informed strategic decision. But we don't have the luxury of time. The cash subsidy to Nathaniel continues to grow. And in the past 2 months, we have seen the whole top layer of management there depart, forcing the town to engage an outside entity, in this case HCG, for the first time to manage its business. So tonight, therefore, I ask the committee, or ask the BET to please accept the committee's report. Thank you.
I'll move down. Mr. Raymer?
Well, preliminarily, I ought to mention that the vote at the committee, the committee consisted of 6 people: Art Norton, Nancy Weisler, Andy Dewis, Bill Drake, Beth Crumick, and myself. But since only 4 of those were sitting members of the BET, those members had a voting capacity. So there were 6 members, but only 4 had a vote. The report that's before you was passed by that committee, but it was passed by that committee on a 3-1 vote. Because I was the dissenting member at that point, I think that this body deserves to have me respond to why I had voted against. I will vote in favor of the acceptance of the report tonight. I voted against it because at that particular moment, there had been certain issues that were raised by the then chief financial officer. We didn't know the nature of those issues, and I was actually pressing the committee to wait with its approval of the final report until we knew more about those issues. At this point, relying on people that I trust, most particularly our controller, who was privy to what these matters were, it seemed certainly safe and sound for me to be voting in favor of the acceptance of the report. So I thought that was a threshold matter that I ought to mention in passing. As you're probably all aware, the committee was asked to frame out what would be the options available to the town for the facility going forward. And it does frame out those options being, in simple words, to continue to operate as a town-operated facility, or to pass the operation of it into the hands of a 501c3 tax-exempt entity, either one that we create for the occasion or to pass it into the hands of an existing entity that might be willing to take the task on. The third choice being to pass it into the hands of a for-profit operator, which may or may not be viable. The last being to discontinue operations and presumably finding other initiatives by which to try and meet the social service responsibilities towards the town that the facility has been keeping. It's important to me to note that the committee, the report of the committee keys basically off of the findings of Health Dimensions Group. That's the entity that's being called HDG here by its initials, which has a true expertise. It is important to note that that report that we keyed off of was asked to and only addresses the market conditions and the dollars and cents of the operation. They were not asked to evaluate the human service needs that are being served by the community, and the report that's before you doesn't attempt to address those human service needs. And yet there's nobody in the room that doesn't fully understand that this is a community that has deep affection for this facility. And we acknowledge as a committee the heartfelt fondness of the community for the social service function that this facility has performed in this town for more or less 100 years, not exactly a passing fancy. It's also important to recognize in passing that this is a period of transition for the facility. It's getting a focus from the BET in town that it's never had with this intensity before, and it's coming at a moment when the executive director has left, the chief financial officer has left, the director of nursing was away on leave, is back. I'm not quite sure where that stands. And the business manager has left. That's quite a bit of transition at the top of any facility, particularly a facility that's at the crossroads here. So my own recommendations actually are a little different than some of my colleagues. My own recommendations are, first of all, I don't think I'd make decisions with this facility right away. I would give this facility an opportunity to find its footing again, to find solutions to these top management. Let this top management try and find some solutions to the financial difficulties that it's had. I think we're talking about to wait a year, perhaps more, but to leap in at this precise moment on the data points that are before you on financial performance is asking to make mistakes. Secondly, I don't view this body, the BET, as being a policy-making body. We're a financial board. We know nothing about running a nursing home. There are decisions to be made. I can understand a decision among those options being made by the Nathaniel Witherell board. I can understand first selectman of this town taking the rein in hands and choosing to make policy or wishing to make policy decisions on behalf of the town and offering guidance. And oftentimes indirectly, but we often look to the RTM as being a reflection of the sentiment of the community. If there were an attitude coming back to us, a sense of the meeting resolution or the like from the RTM, that would be important to me too. But the one thing that seems plain to me is that the effort or the wish in the hands of some to have the BET make decisions or choices among these alternatives, I think is misplaced. That's not our function. It's not what we're good at. We're not a policy-making body, and those are my observations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rimmer. Ms. Cromick?
Well, I guess the bottom line for me is that I think this is a jewel in the crown. I know there are a lot of financial issues, and I know that we've got a lot of different people looking very carefully at the numbers, but I would like to just step back for a second. I've given all of my colleagues here a copy of a letter to the editor that David Ormsby, who is in the audience today, wrote about Nathaniel Witherell. I just want to read briefly from a couple of sentences. The cost of operating this skilled nursing facility for the benefit of Greenwich citizens is relatively modest, currently less than 1% of the town's operating budget. Nathaniel Witherell ranks with our schools, our housing authorities, our museum, our libraries, and recreational facilities as valued quality of life amenities, which collectively distinguish our community. It also reflects our town's longstanding sense of social responsibility for our infirm seniors and their families. And then he states, fortunately, we have in place a skilled and sympathetic nursing staff to share this burden within a few miles of every home in Greenwich. And I truly believe that, and this is now me speaking, I truly believe that unless you've had a member of your family or a friend or someone staying there, you may not realize how important this facility is to our community. I'd like to note that we are in the process, the Commission on Aging is in the process of getting certification as an age-friendly community. That is a very important certification from the World Health Organization and the AARP. And I think it reflects what at least some of our community feels is important with regard to seniors in this community. And I'd like to think that there are a majority of people that do feel it's an important entity and that we should work hard to maintain it. I fully acknowledge there are operational and financial issues, but I believe that under the guidance of Mr. Simon, the work of consultants that have been working with us and continue to do that, that there's going to be a change, actually, and that it should be able to continue with the support of this community. And I hope that people remember as they look at the numbers, it's not just numbers, it's people who sit in the beds at that facility who are impacted every day, every month, every year. And that goes back 100 years. That's pretty impressive. So I hope you'll remember that before you throw this facility out to a third party that may never, ever be able to run it with the quality of care and the number of volunteers and the support that comes into the Friends of Nathaniel Witherell. Thank you.
Mr. Drake, followed by Ms. Faslotis.
Go ahead, Karen, if you like.
The committee members should speak.
I was asking for.
Okay, sure, thank you. We've done 4 years of analysis on the Witherell, and the first thing to remember is exactly what Ms. Crumick just said and what Mr. Raymer said, that it's a key public service, quality long-term care services to our low-income individuals funded by Medicaid. We should never lose sight of that, and the seniors deserve respect and care. But I think Mr. Raymer said it, everyone knows that. Everyone in the room knows this is a human question. However, the market trends are unfavorable. There's a decline in the over 85 age cohort, and there are increasingly competitive alternatives. Stay at home, which is what people prefer to do, than come to an institution like the Witherell, or independent and assisted living facilities. Those are the trends of the future. That's what people are choosing. And there are adverse changes in the Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement methods. They're going to continue to be adverse to us and to the Witherell. Our labor costs are higher than the market and higher than competitors. If we had higher costs for asphalt than our competitors and the market, you'd be asking for action. We have higher costs for this facility. Does that call for action? And the town ownership of the institution negatively, in fact, impacts the payroll, the benefits, the fundraising, and the management. We risk being, the famous story about Johnny and marching with the regiment. The regiment was marching the parade, and everybody has to step off with their left foot. And Johnny was stepping off with his right foot, and his mother was on the sideline saying, "Look at the whole regiment is out of step. Isn't that extraordinary?" We're being Johnny's mother here. There's 169 communities in the town, in the state of Connecticut, and one owns a publicly owned nursing home. The committee's internal work 2 years ago predicted that support of the Witherell would consume ever greater amounts of money. That was the committee that I wasn't on, but Ms. Mr. Norton and Ms. Weissler was on, that prediction proved to be true. Let me, for the continuation of my remarks, I'd like to pass out and take one of those and pass them along. I'd like you to look at what's in front of you, and I have a few copies for others, but everybody here on the board ought to have one. This graphic presents the taxpayer support of the Witherell as it was proposed to this board and to the RTM in 2011 and 2012. You can see those two lines, which are the upper lines. In brief, when the BET vote, it wasn't you, might have been Mr. Mason and Ms. Tarkington, but it was others who sat in these chairs. When you voted to approve the big spending on Project Renew, the plan before you called for an annual constant level subsidy by the town of $855,000. And half a year later, when you voted to approve the financing, that number had increased to $1.2 million, constant and even. The reality is before you. The difference between what was presented to you when you decide, you, the BET and the RTM, you, the residents of Greenwich, decided, the information before you when you decided to continue owning and financing and rebuilding the Witherell is $20 million different from what was the reality over a mere 9 years. Is that $20 million difference, is it important? Is it something which would call for action? That's a question that's before all of us. So what do we do? You know, the committee did its work. We created this nice 86-page report in 2007, and the professionals added this 125-page report in 2019. But the status quo is not satisfactory. The challenges are structural and strategic, and a solution has to be structural and strategic. You know, the pessimist's case for inaction here is not persuasive. Are we blocked from taking action today by the deed from Mr. Bruce in 1903 when he donated those 3 buildings for smallpox and diphtheria and scarlet fever? We've moved on. How about Mrs. Witherell's pavilion for tuberculosis in 1912? There's nothing, doesn't bind what we do today, doesn't relate to what we do today. Are the wishes of Mr. Bruce's great-grandnephews who signed the releases, are our actions constrained by them? Is it the unions or the bonds or the pensions or that prohibit a solution? No, it's not. And we also have the other council. We hear this is somebody else's job. It's the selectman's job. It's the RTM's job. It's the Witherell Board's job. It's management's job. We have a responsibility to do something to our part here on the BET. We also hear management is fixing it. Well, management's been working on fixing it for a decade, and the management is good. This has not happened because David Ormsby is not a good guy. He's a great guy, and Larry Simon's a great guy, and Alan Brown was a competent manager. And it's not to do with the management. It's structural. There's also fear of change, fear of the private sector. All of these reasons and causes for inaction are not persuasive. You know, there's a brighter future if we choose it. You know, let's live among the optimists, not among the pessimists here. We can dispense with the committee and its analysis and recommendations because now, after all this work, we're in the action phase. It's time for the 12 of us to engage with the other parties in town to help to create a solution. There is a solution: a more suitable ownership, professional management, a renewed culture, a board which takes true responsibility, better care, a goal of all of us, better finances, industry standard staffing. You know, and another reason we have to do this is we can't possibly send Nancy Weissler back to work on this again after 20 or 30 years, it would just be cruel. She worked on this in 2003 and 2004. We can't not solve it. So,
Stick with the report.
So Witherell has great strengths, and we should contribute to a solution. The solution isn't tonight's proposition. Tonight, we're just approving this report. But so I would ask for your approval of this report so we can lead on to solving a matter which before you demands a solution. Thank you.
Ms. Vassilotis?
Thank you. I intend to vote to approve this report, but I'd also like to give a different take, Bill, and the rest of the board. I recognize what the Nathaniel Witherell means to many residents of our town. As a teenager, I delivered newspapers to the facility. There's no doubt that it serves a necessary function for the frail and elderly who seek the services. But we serve on a financial board, and I stress a financial board. We are not the board charged with determining the fate of the Nathaniel Witherell. This board has spent years studying the facility, looking at alternative models, and digging deep into their financials. We still don't have all the answers, but we do know that there have been management issues, and tonight we expect to approve money to address that. We do know that the facility is operating at a significant deficit to the tune of many millions of dollars, which means that either taxes will go up significantly or we will need to use fund balance to cover the shortfall. As the finance board of our town, we can present the financial options to our community, but we are not the final decision makers as to which of those options our town will pursue. There are some that will say, we are Greenwich. We can reduce costs by reducing the number of beds, or we can let it continue as it is because we can afford to raise taxes. Money is no object if it is to make sure that the elderly are properly cared for. There are others who will say our tax dollars should not be used to subsidize the facility, especially since healthcare is rapidly changing. We are subsidizing non-Greenwich residents with our tax dollars, and our town residents find themselves there. When they find themselves there, they don't get a break in the cost despite contributing their hard-earned tax dollars to run it. Two divergent points of view. But it is not up to this board, and I would add this board does not have the authority to be deciding which view will prevail. As I stated previously, we can certainly present the financial options, and we should. For example, it is true that this board can always raise the tax levy or use fund balance to cover the shortfalls in their budget. Alternatively, there will be costs associated with a divestiture that must be considered. But it is not up to us to determine what policy view prevails for the Nathaniel Witherell. Keep it or divest it or close it. Ultimately, it is up to the First Selectman's Office, our Greenwich community through the RTM, and the board of the Nathaniel Witherell to decide. I, for one, look forward to the decision so that this board will have a clear direction once and for all on how we will proceed financially.
Thank you. Mr. Weisbrod? Mr. Weisbrod?
So I find myself agreeing with my colleague, Ms. Faziolitis. And I know that may surprise some people here, but here's the thing. This entity has been studied forever. I mean, Nancy Weisler is, a living history of how long it's been studied. And I think that we are at the point where leadership from the First Selectman's Office really is necessary to provide whatever direction the town leader who submits the names of the board members to the RTM wishes to pursue. So let's hear and let's give the First Selectman some time to weigh the situation and advance the course of action. We need to hear that. We need him to speak out and hear what he has to say. I have to challenge the reduction of $1.5 million in the budget submission. It really accomplishes nothing. It's a budget, tactic. It doesn't address all the issues that are really plaguing the institution in terms of, the things that Mr. Norton and others have said, and the challenges in the marketplace, and the things that Mr. Drake has said. It doesn't get solved by a budget tactic that doesn't really change anything. It just takes a number off of a page. What I don't think we want to do, and what we want to be careful about, is seeing the institution die slowly from 1,000 cuts and 1,000 in a slow, painful death. If it's the case that the first selectman wishes an alternative governance and alternative ownership, there are costs associated with that. It have to be laid out, have to be reviewed. The notion of a 501c3 is gallant, it's wonderful, but who are these people that are going to come up and do this? I mean, we talk about strategy, but it's empty unless we start looking at the practicalities. At a minimum, whatever the outcome is, we need to invest the time of this board to address the issues that pertain to Nathaniel Weatherall, and under the leadership of Mr. Simon, I have no doubt that we will, so that we steer the institution as positively as we can. Whatever the outcome may be, it's not going to happen overnight. And I would also say that, the numbers indicate that we have, I think in the last 2 years, about a $4 million on average loss. It's not a small number by any means, and we need to consider that by all means. That's the role of this board. We're the finance board. Is it sustainable over a long period of time? And is that, these are matters that do need to be reviewed. But it is, as Beth Crummick said, 1% of the budget. So it isn't to brush it under the rug. It isn't to say that that's not something that needs to be addressed. But it is to say that we should be thoughtful. We should have leadership from the first selectman. If we don't address this by March or April or in this fiscal year, the world will not come to an end. But if we address it, thoughtlessly, we will make a huge mistake that the residents will regret. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westbrook. Let me take a whack at this. I formed this committee, and I said earlier I wasn't sure what was on my mind when I formed it, and I know exactly what was on my mind. At that time, there were conversations going on. I wasn't on the budget committee. There were conversations about Nathaniel Weatherall, the original estimates, what the expenses were, what they were at that time, and it wasn't done with formal numbers. It wasn't done in a formal setting. It wasn't setting the stage up for a formal question to the residents and taxpayers of the town. It had been done back in late 2000, and the residents had opined then, the RTM. Tonight I sit here agreeing with everything I've heard about what our authority is and what we can do. I'll share my goals, but I also, who's here from the Nathaniel Weatherall Board? Raise your hand for me, please. So tonight, I sit here ecstatically happy over an item that we've postponed because we knew Mr. Simon would come, so we wanted to save up some stuff for him. But the challenges before your board that you've addressed right now with external management, with HDG contract, and I'm hoping you're all set with that, along with dialogue from some of our membership, and I'll say the Minority Caucus leader helping to make sure we have that going at least for the rest of this budget. I think that's just a monumental change. Is it the change that's going to fix something? I can't say that right now, but we're gonna look at Nathaniel Weatherall, and I would really rather the 12 members of the BET to be able to sit down at the Board of Selectmen and say, look, here's the real situation. Here's where it's going. You have options. There's lots of options. I guarantee you could go across the town and find all kinds of options for Nathaniel Weatherall. The Nathaniel Weatherall Board is also doing another dramatic step that I'm appreciative of, and that's continuing the accountings to close up the numbers. We've heard so many different numbers through the years, and again, how we got here tonight, sort of my analogy is the lifeboat. Let's all get in the one. Let's figure out what we're doing and figure out where we're going. And I'm appreciative of this. The RTM has got committees looking at this, and there's been people who are saying, well, just raise taxes and we'll fund it. And there's other people saying, put a for sale sign in the door. I'm not advocating anyone. I'm advocating every option we have for this community, and so it's there. But this is a positive conversation. It'll get even better. I have an item that I put as a routine item because I think it is routine, because I think this is a difficult dialogue. And this board, time to time, I will say this board is given the position to make a decision for when other boards and commissions sometimes can't. Sometimes it's on what are we going to build or what's the project going to be. And I often use the analogy, well, don't give us the decision. That's really not ours. And if you do give us that decision, don't dislike our decision. So this is a Board of Selectmen. It'll start there. I can assure you that there's conversations going on with the new first selectman. This is going to work out. I think we're in a positive place. I do hope we accept this report. I think some of the things are already actually underway, and I think the Nathaniel Willow Board has done a lot of these already, so they're ahead of us. So that's just my take on it, and I hope we move forward. And what's really nice to see from our point of view is there's agreement. It's for all different reasons, and I think we're going to reach out. This board will reach out. We'll keep the RTM involved. The budget process begins tomorrow. Our budget, where the BET does have authorities, we have prior year closeouts. We have to take care of that. That's our responsibility. We'll do that in the budget process. But going forward, I think this discussion needs to be not sort of everybody's talking in between meetings. This has got to be a formal decision, and I'd like to see this a point where this board can actually go to the Board of Selectmen and say, here's where it's at. You should consider looking at this. So that's my opinion on this. Okay, on the Nathaniel Witherell, let's see, what's it called? Timeout. Let me get the name right. On the Nathaniel Witherell Strategic Planning Committee report to the BET, that is before us as is with none of the other attached documents, including Mr. Drake's handout.
Mr. Mason, may I ask one clarifying question?
Sure.
The report itself identifies on its second page a series of recommendations. I just want to clarify, by this board accepting the report, we are not authorizing those recommendations to proceed. Is that correct?
As I just said, some of the things are in process, but no, we are not. We're accepting this report with this information, and we're accepting its recommendations. It doesn't mean we're implementing anything or doing anything. It's just we're accepting this report. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. 1200, the report is accepted. That brings us back to page 1 of our agenda, to NW2. And can I get a motion, Ms. Tarkington, and then I'll call for discussion?
Yes, I'd like to move NW2 for Nathaniel Witherell, additional appropriations and professional fees of $230,000.
Seconded by Ms.
Second.
By Ms. Moriarty. This, committee reports before discussion. Ms. Tarkington.
Yes, the Nathaniel Witherell Board Chairman, Larry Simon, requested an additional appropriation of $150,000 for a short-term executive director provided by Health Dimensions Group, also known as HDG, $30,000 for various consulting services provided by HDG, $25,000 for cybersecurity, and $25,000 for the development of accounting procedures to reconcile TNW's matrix accounting entries with the Town of Greenwich's Munis accounting system. The additional appropriation is requested to enhance Nathaniel Witherell operations professionalism due to employee turnover. The committee requested an accounting of funds spent be provided at the end of the fiscal year period, and the committee voted 4-0-0 to approve this requested appropriation.
Okay. Are there any other committees that can consider this? No. Discussion on the item. Ms. Moriarty?
Yes, I suggested removing this item from routine to non-routine. I wanted to get on the record that the Nathaniel Witherell Board voted in favor of the interim request. That's something that hadn't been done at the time the Budget Committee had considered the item. And I believe the vote was in favor. Is that correct? May I ask through the chair, may I ask Mr. Mason, Mr. Simon?
801.
Okay, thank you. And the details of the request or the background are in the supporting documentation, but both the executive director services and the consulting services are somewhat related, but the full amounts are not necessarily intended to be spent if you don't need them for the full 6 months or for the full scope. Is that also correct?
I mean, it's essentially $25,000 a month for the executive director. And consulting is like a little, is a menu. You can pick and choose among the services they offer. And once.
Yeah, I'm not, these are the new ones.
It just went to green, so
I
it
think it just
probably
went
is
to green.
on.
Just tap it real quick.
It's green.
Oh, okay.
I might not be fast. But, no, the $150,000 is for 6 months of salary plus expenses for each of the 6 months of $5,000. The $30,000 is for consulting services from a menu of people they provide at different prices, that it was thought best to take this choice. And we'll see what services they can provide that we need. I think we have many needs, actually. Do you want me to keep going?
No. As far as the rest of the explanation, not for my benefit, maybe other board
You
members might need.
you had the questions, so.
No,
you-
my question. So I just wanted to confirm or to thank the Nathaniel Witherell Board. I think that you were being very proactive in how you handled the vacancy in the executive director position and the other positions, and bringing in a company who can assist you in the interim. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'd like to reiterate what I said on the last item. I think this is an epic step. I think Nathaniel Witherell as a board, you had some challenges with 2 retirements, another management, your management confidential people, you're down to 1 right now. And I think with the issues that we have going on, the finances and all the other issues, I think this is monumental. I'm hoping when it goes to the RTM in March, I'm hoping they approve it. And then what day do we start with the budget committee so we understand how we're going from July 1 on?
Well, I'm going to say we're presenting at 9 o'clock on Friday, February 7th. Should get your tickets early. And seriously, and then in my 3 hours that I've been allocated, I'm planning to go through where we are, talk about some of the points raised, talk about many of the challenges we face, and why I feel optimistic and what concerns I have. And it's going to be a relatively full discussion.
Thank you. And to your fellow members, sincere thanks for coming out this evening. And Ms. Moriarty and I have a lot of conversations about all of the boards and commissions in town, and having them get more involved and be part of the discussions. It just creates a better communication. Your attendance is appreciated. Mr. Ormsby, it is good to see you there. Always there for that, Nathaniel Witherell, and thank you.
3. Takes me an hour to warm up.
Any other? Ms. Moriarty has just reduced them to 2 hours.
I started
Okay,
earlier.
let's try and vote on this one. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That item is carried 12-0-0. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Did I miss anything? Chairman's report. Let me just get organized for a minute. So our orientation meeting was some 20 days ago, and I want to thank everyone who's helped me, committee chairs, everybody, every member has helped me. I want to thank Ms. Moriarty. I would say it's a big change. As I said to the controller before, their department, our strength is communication, knowledge, if it's shared. And I've seen some emails over the weekend, and I can't tell you, one of the things that we are doing in finance is, and I'm working with the town administrator as well, is that when you have a specific item that you're requesting information on something, I've asked for that to be shared with the BET. Obviously, I think that's important, and I think that we're off and running. I can't tell you, the communications are vital, and let's keep on moving. And I look forward to seeing everybody at the upcoming meetings. We're going to be together quite a bit in the near future. And Ms. Tarkington has been warned about fresh donuts and good coffee, and but we'll see.
There's a 30-day notice period, Mr. Mason.
She's tough. Okay, that takes us to item 12 on the agenda, and I will call on the clerk, Mr. Drake.
Yes, there are December 16th minutes in your package, and I have an amendment, actually two amendments on one page to propose. I'll pass them out.
I have one. I'm just going to add ease while that's circulating.
So you can see the December minutes in your package.
Mr. Mason?
Ms. Crumick?
As the former clerk and noting that we have what looks like a full page of text to consider, might we postpone the approval on this to the next meeting? I haven't seen this, and those minutes have been posted for quite a while, so I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this.
So we have a motion to postpone these to our next meeting, I think is what I heard. Do I have a second on that? Second. Okay. Discussion on the motion? If I may, I would like to just clarify, one of the things that we've done is, so we're not editing on the fly, the actual change in number 1 is one sentence in quote, and in number 2, it's just a deletion and adding one sentence there. So if you'd like a second to read, otherwise I will call for the vote on that motion.
I'd like to have a chance to look at the minutes and see what changes you're proposing to the document that I prepared with the recording secretary.
Okay. Sure. Take a moment. Please do. And your motion is on the floor, and it is second. Discussion has been had, and I'm just trying to honor your request. I can call for the vote if you would like, or if you want time.
Give me a minute, and then we can call for the vote, okay?
Okay.
Mr. Mason,
Ms. Crumick?
may I just walk through these changes? In which you are, as I understand it, you want to add the sentence, violations of election law are not in keeping with the high standards necessary to serve on the BET. And then you want to delete a section in which we state the BET members discuss the misleading presentation of incomplete information in the submitted motion. The BET members also discuss the ramifications of the proposed motions on the BET, how its intent is contrary to board norms, including trust, integrity, honesty, and good faith, and the impact on the willingness of town residents to volunteer to administer the financial affairs of the town, and to replace those sentences with the statement, the BET members discuss the presentation of information in the submitted motion.
I think that's exactly what Mr. Drake is portraying here.
I'd like to know if any other of my colleagues have any comments on this before, because I'm very concerned that you're taking away some of the impact of what we certainly were concerned about on our side, and you clearly had concerns on your side, so we were trying to balance both.
Further discussion on the motion, Mr. Raymer?
I, for one, would have an easier time digesting this if I could do it in a context in which I could play the tape on YouTube or whatever to see if, in fact, the quotation on his first paragraph was, in fact, what we voted upon, and in the second paragraph, whether the change in the characterization matches what's happened. it's a little difficult to do that in a setting in which, rather than sending this to us some days in advance when we could have looked at YouTube one of the evenings, instead we're trying to do this from recollection of something which happened a little more than a month ago. And I think it puts me personally at a disadvantage. It may be true for others too.
Further discussion? I'll make a comment about number one. Number one was written and submitted in the actual item added to the agenda. So that language comes right from that. So if that helps you on one item, I don't know.
Well, I have a little problem with then where it's being added. It's not being, what's written on the page that was distributed by Mr. Drake says that this line, the violations of election law line, would appear after the first line on page 6. And then it records a second separate vote on that statement all by itself. And I'm not sure that's how it happened. It may be that you've correctly quoted what was there in writing. I don't have that in front of me either, but that would be fairly easy for me to verify. But I'm not recalling that there was a separate vote on that separate sentence, which is what you're asking the minutes to reflect.
I can try to be helpful there. These motions were submitted in writing, as the chairman said. And the document, I think, was available to all 12 members long ago, early month of December, frankly. And the sequence in that document, which I have in front of me, was 1, 2, and 3. And the sequence was 1, which had to do with that great mass of information that one member had. Remember that?
Yep.
372 pages, which has indeed been posted. The second one?
It was submitted by Ms. Vasiliotis.
Yeah. The second one was this one here, this sentence that begins with the word violations. And the third one was about issuing a statement about training to avoid violations in the future. So in what's before you, just to answer your question, Mr. Raymer, the corrections made on this page will conform the sequence exactly to the written documents that you were given in early December. That was the sequence.
They don't, though.
Yeah, they do.
They do not conform to the vote we took at the meeting. There was a single vote. So the motions would have to be merged to reflect what you're indicating if we even go forward this. But Mr. Chair, if I can add something, because I received a comment in writing tonight about a change for the next set of minutes that talked about reopening partisan controversy, about remaining states-like, about being petulant. Inappropriate comments, I might add. But I would say that if the member that indicated those comments to me felt that way, being a little bit not even-handed in how these minutes are being handled.
I'd be happy to respond to that. I am guilty, and I apologize to my fellow member, Ms. Moriarty, for a reply all, which was very poorly done, and I'm truly sorry for that. What I'm going to take out of it personally is an effort to be better and to try to cooperate with all members, which has always been my intention.
So,
Can I finish? However, this sentence, violations of election law are not in keeping with the high standards necessary to serve on the BT, was voted, and it is not in the minutes. So I'm sorry that I find myself tonight obliged to put it. I won't make any questions about why it isn't there. It was voted, and it is not in the minutes, and therefore this amendment is necessary.
Mr. Weisbrot. I'm sorry. First.
Leslie, you wanted to say?
I'd like to disagree with Mr. Drake. Mr. Mason, I think we do have a problem here in reconstructing what happened. We certainly, I listened to several times the video with what we actually voted on, and it was not on this sentence. And I think to start adding it now is just more of some of the breaking of norms that we seem to have found ourselves in the last 3 months. And I would ask that you withdraw this request for the adding the sentence on the violation of election law. I would propose that in the paragraph, instead of deleting the paragraph and inserting a new sentence, that we simply take out the misleading, so that the sentence reads, the BET members discuss the presentation of incomplete information in the submitted motion, because I don't think anyone can state that there was a complete presentation. And I really don't want to go into all the facts, nor do I think the other members of this body want to. So what I would suggest is that we not take that first change, and in the second, not take either of them, but simply take out the word misleading.
Mr. Weisbrod was next, followed by Ms. Faslotis.
Disappointing that this topic is coming up
Yet again.
yet again.
Haven't missed a meeting so far.
Mr. Raymer, if you would like to make comments out of line like that and not being called on, I will fail to recognize you going forward. We will follow an orderly fashion. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. You may find at the end of this, there might be even another little lesson learned. Mr. Weisbrod, please continue. I'm sorry for Mr. Raymer's interruption.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My apologies.
I would strongly suggest that we leave the minutes the way they were written, and I wouldn't even change the word misleading. The issue of using this committee to inappropriately vet matters that were before the State Elections Enforcement Commission were reviewed and voted on by the State Election Enforcement Commission after an exhaustive one-year publicly disclosed review were, in my view, the notion of bringing it to this committee were, in my view, a serious, as I've said before here, a serious violation of the norms of this committee, of the BET, and frankly, of governance in the town. And it strongly detracts from any willingness on the part of people to work in a, collegial, bipartisan way, and I think strongly discourages volunteers to offer their service into this town. And, I think we'd all like to just move forward and do the work that we were all elected to do. It is stunning to me that we would revive this topic yet again for no purpose whatsoever. And I think we do ourselves a tremendous disservice. I would leave it just the way it is, and let's move on.
Thank you, Ms. Faslotis.
Well, since this was a motion that I submitted, and the first sentence says, motion submitted to the chairman on December 2nd, 2019, by BET member Faslotis on behalf of 4 members, the motion did have 2 other things there. So I'm not, again, in the interest of being fair, the motion had 3 sections. We focused on 1 section there. My intent, at least, was to just include that. We did vote on the motion, and it was what it was. With respect to the others, I don't want to rehash, and I don't want to go through what was discussed, what wasn't discussed, but there was a motion that was submitted, and this is not correct the way it's written.
Hang on, you've already spoken. Anybody who has not spoken? Mr. Drake?
Just a very brief mention. The sentence in question is on page 66 of the December package as a motion written before the body. So just for anyone that wants to find it, it was discussed, it was on the table, you'll find it on page 66 of the package.
Mr. Raymer?
So to my original point, picking up on what Ms. Vasiliotis has just said, if you're going to refer to something that was distributed 2 meetings prior, it would be good to give people advance notice or give them another copy at the time, not spring it on them at the moment that this item comes up on the agenda. It's the reason why one has an opportunity to take a look back at what the original papers said, take a look back at what the tape shows, so that you get the minutes right. The point of Mr. Drake's motion is the minutes are incorrect. He wants to have them read correctly. That's a correct motion to make. But if what Ms. Vasiliotis is saying, he's asking there be a correction which is itself incorrect. If we're going to correct the minutes, let's correct the minutes to something which is correct. And give us an opportunity to go back and take a look at our papers at home, which we didn't bring and which Mr. Drake has not passed out to us. Give us an opportunity to take a look at the tape when we all know exactly what in fact happened. Then we know what we can do on a correction of the minutes. But this is not the right way to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for my interruptions before.
No, thank you. So, let me take a whack at something. This conversation, it's only going to be receptive to open ears. I agree with everything I've heard. I know what was submitted in the call that meeting, that exact language. I know Mr. Raymer was aware of that language before it went in there because we actually had made some changes in it to make it somewhat more plausible. That sentence was taken out. I will tell you where this stems from and the strength that we need. It was at our inaugural meeting or orientation meeting. I said to the then chair, I said, please put something on the agenda, not that I knew I was going to be chair or anything, to have a report from the minority caucus leader. I believe in that. I do believe in, and I want that kind of transparency. The next set of minutes is not before us, and I'm asking for a little leeway. And if you object, I'll wait till we get to those, or maybe we're going to postpone those before we get to those. There were comments in there about people's behavior from a previous term, and someone didn't like that behavior. I didn't bring that up. I didn't even rebut it. I could have. Maybe I should have. But in the interest of the strength of this board, I chose not to at that time. But yet, even when the request came to the clerk of the board in writing to have those words put in our minutes, I said, okay, the clerk had some interesting conversations with the members of his caucus about why you're doing that. We all know that our minutes should have attendance, motions, votes, objections. They're not. They're too much, and hopefully we're going to work on that as a group going forward. And in the position I had, I did not want to modify what someone said they said at a meeting. I just simply couldn't have supported those minutes. So Ms. Crumick has a motion seconded by Ms. Raymer to postpone. I'm going to, by a voice vote, add the next set of minutes into that. And I encourage us all going forward. But I will tell you, and I'm speaking to one of our members who made a comment before about using words like serious and inappropriate. If you would like to use words like that and misleading, it's your prerogative. But you have to understand, this is a two-sided conversation. The minutes are very, very difficult. They're very complicated. They serve to educate the public what the votes were on the issues, and not the opinions or political dialogue. If you would like those in the minutes, okay, but it's going to be subject to this. So I would encourage all of us that were part of those minutes. Some of us were not part of some and part of others. I would encourage all of us, if you'll accept a slight modification to the motion for these 2 minutes to be referred back. But this time I'm going to ask that our clerk have Ms. Vasiliotis, Ms. Moriarty, and Mr. Raymer sit down and do that. So if you'll accept that modification of the motion, I will accept the vote on the motion to postpone these minutes till our next meeting. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick point of order. Do we have to keep them separate because I was not part of the December?
I completely recognize your position. No, we don't. I'm doing that in the interest of consistency. I think the challenge is we would have to vote for them separately if amended by this group. And I think at that point, you would be able to vote for one and abstain on the other, as you would see, because you weren't part.
Right.
I think that would be no matter what you do, I think we're still going to have to vote on them separately.
Okay.
Ms. Moriarty had asked me that question before, and I do believe if you're not here, you should abstain on minutes. If you weren't an elected official serving on the board, but you were in a room, I still think you need to be elected and seated and present to vote on minutes. I think that's proper.
Just to indicate my question on that particular issue, because Ms. Cruiser was in the room for the entire
I know.
conversation. So I was asking whether there is a requirement that she not vote either in favor or against the minutes, even though when she wasn't an elected member, if she was here for the entire meeting. And I think you said there isn't a requirement, it's just been common practice.
Correct. And I, with Ms. Moriarty, as I would always say, this is what I think. If I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but this is what I think at the time. But thank you very much.
Just to understand what you said, you listed 4 names. I want to be sure I had them right. You want to say them again?
Mr. Drake, because you're clerk, Ms. Fasloda says, I'm handing that to our vice chair, and I'm going to take the minority caucus leader and senior member on that side.
Great.
Oh, don't say that. Can't say that.
Thank you.
So with that slightly modified motion, all those in favor?
Can you just repeat the 4 people for Leslie?
I just repeated over here. My
Yeah,
neck.
but we're not hearing it on this side.
I was talking
It wasn't in-
during
it
both
wasn't in
times,
the-
so.
Okay. The motion is amended to have these minutes brought back to us at our next meeting by the clerk of the board, Mr. Drake, Ms. Faslotis as our vice chair, Ms. Moriarty, and Mr. Raymer.
We'll get together and work on it.
Yes, you can watch videos, you can do whatever you want to do.
Mr. Mason,
Ms. Crumick,
as the former clerk, I think I ought to be
that's a
part of
good
this.
point. That's a good point.
Since I've been wrestling with these minutes for the last,
So guess what, Mr. Raymer? You're out. Thank you. And please excuse, that's a mistake I'm making. I should have thought of that. I'm sorry. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's try that one more time. 11 in favor, one opposed, and 0 abstaining. Thank you. Okay. I've done that. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Thank you.